Within this lesson, we're going to talk about adding in our powerup dot. So this is going to be another object that we're going to be placing on our screen, and so that means that we should go over here and reproduce one of these objects, because we're going to need quite a few of these. Again, the same, so we're going to need those X and Y's. We're going to need to place them somewhere randomly on the screen. We're going to also need one power up, so we'll just call it power up, and for now we're going to put that at false. And so now we're going to do, we should change this as well, power, I'm just going to call it power dot. So we're going to have an X and Y coordinate for our power dot. And we're going to simply draw a dot. If power up is 0, we're going to draw that dot. We're going to do the calculations for it. So if it's available, we're going to draw it. And if it's not available, then we're not going to draw it. And when it's not available, that means that the Pac-Man's eaten it, and we're not going to be showing it at the moment. So going down here, much like we did with the ghost, when we render it out, I want to do a quick check to see if it exists. So just like we did with the ghost, so I'm going to close these ones down over here to minimize them, so not taking up as much space on the screen. And I'm going to do a check to see if power dot is power up. So if it's false, which it should be by default, we go up here, we see that we did set power up at false. So here we can get our random calculations, so we can set our power dot X and power dot Y position. And then here again, I'm going to be using that my num. It's going to be adding in 30 so I don't end up right at the top. And I'm going to do power dot Y. And of course you could adjust these to be canvas, dependent on the canvas, these values. So depending if you change the size of your canvas, it can easily adjust as well. So sometimes that's a good idea to keep as much as you can dynamic in order for accommodating adjustments and so on. So now one other thing, we have to set this to true so that we don't create a whole bunch of dots there. So now we've done our calculation there for the power dot, and so now we can go down and we're actually going to check to see if the power dot exists, and if it does, so this all up here has to do with moving around the enemy. So over here we're going to see if the power dot exists, then we're going to draw that out on the screen according to the position. So we're not necessarily having it the same way that we're doing these images. So of course, if you did have an image of the dot, you could include that as well. But for the purposes of what we're doing within this course, we want to demonstrate just different ways how to draw on the canvas. So another way to draw on the canvas is again that fill style, because we do want to set a particular color. So I want it to be yellow to be consistent with Pac-Man games. I believe that the dots are probably white or yellow in color, but for this lesson we'll just keep it yellow. And now what we need to do is we actually need to draw an arc. So we need to draw a dot, circular fashion. So typically if you were to draw on the canvas, you draw a square or a rectangle. And if we want to do something other than that, then we have to plot out the paths and draw out the paths of where we want the connections to be made. So rectangles by default, I'm just going to draw a quick rectangle just to illustrate how easy it really is to do a rectangle. And what we're doing, again, similar to what we're doing before with the drawing of the image. So we're getting an X and a Y coordinate. So if I wanted this particular dot to show up certain X and Y coordinate, I could do X and Y, and then this is the width, so the next coordinate is going to be the width. So if I wanted a dot that was 20, or a rectangular in this case, or if I wanted a square, I could do 20 by 20, refresh it, and we get this random position of this square. So not ideal for the game that we're doing, because I do want to have that as an arc instead of the rectangle. So a few more steps that we need to do in order to accomplish this. We can see there within the Mozilla guide, in order to draw an arc, so we do the X, Y, we do the radius, the start angle, end angle, and whether it's anti-clockwise. So we've got this type of value here, so 75 by 75. So this is where the positioning is. So it's 50, 0, 2 times pi. And that gives us a circular object. And then all we'd have to do is fill that. And we're doing this thing called begin path, because we're actually drawing on the canvas. So we need to include that as well. So it's context begin path. And this lets the canvas know that you're actually going to begin drawing a path. And I'm going to update this to include that math pi times 2. And when you are drawing out paths, you have to actually close the path after you've done drawing with it, and then after you close it, that's the point where you can actually fill it. So this should give us a circle. Going back to the guide here, there's start angle, end angle, and the anti-clockwise. So I need to set the start angle to 0, and I think that should fix that a little bit. Of course, the problem here too is that I've got fill rectangle, so I've got to change that into arc. So my radius is going to be 20, which is probably going to be a little bit bigger than I need, but for now that should be okay. So yeah, definitely bigger than what I want, and I probably do want to change this to be white. I want to make this a little bit smaller. Refresh it. So this gives us our powerup dot. And in the next lessons, we're going to be talking about how we can determine if the Pac-Man is eating the dot, and then if the Pac-Man's eating the ghost. So some really cool things coming up in the next lessons.